Bam.
This is Todd Bensman, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
I've had you on a couple of times, Todd, because you do something that we need a lot more knowledge on, and you talk about and you cover the border as a profession, and this means a lot of things. I mean, we're talking immigration policy, but also, I mean, state affairs, right? Like the transmittal of the other day. I don't know if you know Tim Foley, but he's out in Arizona. I'm actually supposed to go hang out with him in the next couple of weeks here, but he monitors the southern Arizona border. And he's like, hey, by the way, the other day I saw cartel members armed carrying prisoners into America, transporting these guys. And so when we look at all this stuff, it's crazy. And I guess where I want to start is it's troubling when we have governors from Florida and Texas working politically to send immigrants, illegal or not, to places like Martha's Vineyard, who's now activated their emergency operations center and activated, I think it's 100 National Guard members. Now, the emergency operations center has to do what it does to handle these things, but if Del Rio, Texas, which is, I don't know, it's got to be comparable in size to Martha's Vineyard. It, what do you make of all of this? Is really where I want to start.
Well, if you're talking about the busing that's going on, that is bringing immigrants in a public way with TV cameras to cities, if you are advocating as a city, that you are a sanctuary place for immigrants, a
Right.
place where you're going to be able to work. We're going to give you driver's licenses. We're going to give you the right to vote in local elections. We're going to make sure that you have food and shelter and take care of every. Well, man, you got to live with that. This
Yeah.
is the reality. When you advocate those policies, guess what? There's plenty that are going to come to your town to take advantage of that, and they'll never end until you stop providing that. If you don't want people to come to your cities, stop providing sanctuary, food, shelter, and everything else. Help federal authorities deport them, and you'll see how fast that turns around. So the other thing I notice about this, I guess, controversy. I don't know why it's a controversy, but we have had more than 2 million illegal immigrants go from the border into America legally and illegally. There have been probably 1 million of those are gotaways that we never caught, but there's over 1 million of them that we allowed in with parole documents. Well, those people have to go somewhere. And they have been going to those very same cities for 18 months straight. It's
Jesus.
just that nobody wanted to look. The New York school systems have been staggering under the weight of all these new kids. They can't keep up with them. They don't have teaching staff. And that's like for months before Republican governors started doing some bus rides up there. I mean, this has been going on for a long time already. These cities have already absorbed hundreds of thousands, and they don't even know it, or at least they choose not to know it. And lastly, I suspect that there are mayors across the nation that are suffering silently because these people have to go somewhere. And they are going to, I mean, by the hundreds of thousands to cities all across America. You just don't see them because they're not busing them on a governor's bus at governor's expense. The whole thing is a little absurd.
It is absurd. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I want to make sure we cover this. And I just got to say again, like, this reaches all across oceans and across continents. This, I'm just going to call it a failed immigration plan. America loves immigrants, but we get awfully NIMBY when they start showing up on our doorstep. Like, whoa, we're not provisioned for this.
Or when you can see them, you can see them actually, because they've been on your doorstep for a year and a half straight. You just didn't see them because you chose to look away.
Yeah. So I was in, I know we talked about this before, but I was in Del Rio, Texas, basically the summer that the vice president was tasked to go to the border and figure it out. And I'm like, "Oh, she won't go to Del Rio. I will," you know? And I talked to the judge there, and he's a super nice guy. He's like, "I'm a Democrat, and I can't stand this policy because our little town of 30,000 people, we're not provisioned for this." And we're just talked, and I, just because of my background, I'm like, "Well, what about the capacity for linguists that you have to maintain at all times, or at least on a contract basis? Because if you don't live in Del Rio, 8 hours, 6, you know, you're from Texas, how far it is from even San Antonio, which is in West Texas, but nowhere near Del Rio, what it would take to get the right kind of, I mean, just they're not provisioned for that. And then you see what that looks like when 50 people show up to Martha's Vineyard and they're like, "Oh my God, we're not ready for you guys. Activate the EOC," right? And so that it is ridiculous. How much of this, though, is politics over policy? Because a lot of this seems awfully political.
I regard the busing operations as entirely political.
Okay.
These governors are just trying to make a point. I don't think it's useless, though. They're trying to make you see, you know, that movie about the meteor coming to Earth,
Yeah.
and it's called Don't Look or Don't Look
Right.
Up.
Yeah.
Well, that's what they've been doing for 18 months straight, not looking up. And these bus operations are forcing people to look down at what's in front of them. So, you know, I think it's useful in that regard. If you don't like it, if you don't like hundreds of thousands of people moving in onto your social welfare rolls, then ask the federal government to secure the border, deter them from coming, deport them, find a way to deport them. They can't deport criminal aliens from a lot of these cities because these cities are sanctuary cities, so they won't tell ICE when their criminals get out of jail so they can
Yeah.
come get them. You're stuck with them. I mean, you know, if you don't do that. So, you know, this is instead what I see a lot of them are doing. Hey, give us money to help feed, house, and shelter them, which can only do one thing, which is to beckon more and more and more and more. That's how this works. That's the
Right.
dynamic of how this all works.
It's one thing to say that you're compassionate and all humans are important and need a place to live. It's another thing to provision that. I mean, it's just like anytime we want to make these feel good changes, that there has to be legislation behind it. And by the way, where is the legislature, right? Where is the House and the Senate doing what they're supposed to do to stabilize this? And I don't see either side putting forward a comprehensive strategy that's bipartisan.
Well, the houses are controlled by Democrats, and the House and the Senate, and of course the
Yeah.
White House. And nobody wants to do anything to draw attention to what's happening down there because even Democrats hate this. Mainstream regular Democrats have always been border security minded. Even Bernie Sanders, up until just a few years ago, was like, you know, this is killing the working man. You know, so it's what's happening right now is, you know, you have an election coming up and Democrats are content to just let this happen as long as nobody looks up. I mean, really, that's what this is about. So they're not going to do anything about it except deny that it's happening, which
It's
they're doing.
and it's funny. This shouldn't be a controversial episode, but it will be. You know, because folks don't like this. They don't like to be told, you know, what's actually going on. And when
And
you go out, yeah,
it's unnecessary to be controversial about this. The U.S. Customs and Border Protection keeps a really good website, a public.gov website with all the apprehension numbers. And you can, and they've got the lines, the chart, you know, they have the charts on there, and anybody can, they're nonpartisan. They're Biden right now. Biden controls that website. And you can see by the nonpartisan numbers that we are in a territory that the United States has never been close to in terms of just the numbers. The numbers tell the story that we are in the midst of a truly historic immigration event in American history. I mean, it really is. The rate at which they're coming over the border exceeds Ellis Island at its peak. And we all know, I mean, Ellis Island is a big tourist attraction. I mean, it's in the history pages, the history books. It's like this famed historic event. And this thing is surpassing that.
Yeah. And in an unsustainable way. I mean, again, we're trying to let people in that we just don't have the capacity to care for these people. That in itself is inhumane. It's like this concept of ethical saturation where you try to do the right thing every single time without any idea of what the right thing is, and you start to damage people, right? They start to get left
Well,
behind.
that's right. I mean, you right now, I mean, you can go to probably, any American city. I mean, San Antonio, Portland, Maine. New York Times just did a big story about Portland, Maine, just overwhelmed with illegal immigrants from the southern border. You can't get further. That's on the northern border, man. Uh, and they never had any kind of a problem like this on the northern border. The point is that this is something that is transformational to the
Yeah.
United States, and it doesn't help anybody to deny that it's happening. Just the first step to solving alcoholism is to admit you're a drunk. So right now we're still in this weird stage of I'm not a drunk, you know,
Yeah.
never
Yeah.
mind these 6 DWIs,
Right.
but I don't know if that's a good metaphor.
Well, either way, even if it's not, we're still bringing in people. We're also conflating different problems, right? We have a foreign policy problem, we have a drug problem, we have a
Yeah, you're
cartel
right.
problem, right? So, hey, let's please let's house people, asylum. And by the way, the State Department, the government, this government right now, this administration turned their backs on the Afghans. They said after the state, nothing. Now, if they could jump across the ocean somehow magically, they could just walk across the border, wouldn't be a problem. I mean, this is how confusing this whole thing is. I'm all
Well,
for
we do
great new
have plenty of
Americans on my side.
Afghans coming.
What's
I'm
that?
sorry. Go ahead.
No,
We do
I'm
have
saying, oh,
plenty of
yeah, go
Afghans
ahead.
crossing the southern border.
Right, if they can get there, right? If they can get there on their own, but
Yeah, they
we
can.
abandon these people and we fill a certain number of planes and then that's it. And then we stop. And it's just the atrocities don't ever quit. You've been on the cover and in the New York Post twice. Is it in the past week? Yesterday, you led their news with
Yes.
again more foreign policy disasters.
Right, you're right, but, people need to understand that when you have a mass migration of humanity at this level, that it creates all these secondary and third degree problems, like you're saying. There's foreign policy problems, there's drug problems. It exacerbates all of the pre-existing problems that we've always had and we probably always will have, but it just makes everything so much worse. I'll give you a great example, and I'll talk to you about the cover of the New York Post from yesterday. But um, the drug cartels or the Mexican cartels are becoming hugely, fabulously wealthy from this human immigration. And what do you think they do with all that wealth? They buy armaments, bullets, weapons, and I mean military grade
Right.
weapons with that money. They're earning somewhere before this. They were earning somewhere in the neighborhood of like 500 million a year, and now the estimates are as high, according to ICE intelligence, as high as $13 billion a year.
Jeez.
That's if you look at that trend line, it goes like this. Even if you take the conservative estimates of how much they're making, it's still like this.
Right.
And that's a problem for Mexico's central government. At some point, those cartels can exercise influence on central government decisions on everything. Mexico is America's biggest trading partner, and it's an oil producing country. You do not want hugely powerful paramilitary organizations influencing things that affect American national interests, right? Like oil, and maybe they'll say, we're going to have you cut off the oil because if you don't, we're going to send our troops to Mexico City, which they frequently threaten.
Yeah.
And when they threaten that, the Mexican central government caves immediately, which tells you something. And this is a big international diplomatic national interest problem for the United States that I think is not recognized enough. We're going to start seeing that. And it all stems from this mass migration crisis that
Hmm.
Washington started.
Yeah, again, this goes to these unintended consequences, right? You start to
Yeah.
empower the cartels, and then we don't seem to be willing. Look, we have means to take care of the cartels, but we don't seem to be willing to deal with it as one of the leading causes of death every year. And our I don't know if you saw the numbers the other day, but our average age has dropped. Now, a lot of that's going to be COVID, but a good deal of that is going to be fentanyl because we're losing 50,000, 100,000 people a year to fentanyl overdoses.
Right. That's another, I guess, I don't know if that's unintended at this point, because we know exactly who's making it, how, where, and everything about it. But we are not really acting in any kind of forceful manner to shut that down. We're pretending it
Yeah.
doesn't work. Don't look up. But I would point out that there is some solution. You don't have to do nothing. I mean, we had for years and years operations in Colombia with the Colombian government, and American troops down there, equipment, helicopters, an arsenal of weaponry, and we would go into the labs, the super labs in the jungle, and blow them up and burn them down and put the pressure on. Well, Mexico has super labs all over the place. We know exactly where they are. Everybody knows where they are. And, I don't understand why the American government doesn't do what it did with the Colombians for years and years, blow them up. That's not an unreasonable thing. We have years of precedent for doing that sort of thing with foreign governments.
Yeah. Yeah. It is it's exasperating. And there is this toll that we're being forced to pay in human lives and well-being of our citizens. I mean, this actually really goes directly against what the oath that the president takes is we're losing the ability to protect the people who live here.
Well, we refuse to. I think people don't understand. The majority. I mean, this is my job, so all day long I'm thinking about this stuff, and I know most people are not. But the statutory requirement is that when people enter illegally, we must detain them. It's not a shall or maybe or prosecutorial discretion or anything. It says you shall detain them and you shall deport them. And during the deportation process, they're in detention. They never get out. That's the law. So the Biden administration has decided not to follow it. We're not going to follow it. What are you going to do about it? We're not following it. Their idea of border management and security is to usher them in to the country in an orderly way. That's their definition for border security. So when you hear Kamala Harris out there saying, "Yeah, the border's secure," under their definition, yeah, if your definition is that there's no big giant Del Rio migrant camp forming on the
Right.
grant because there's no big camps showing up down there, it's secure.
Yeah. The when I every year I go on a charity ride and we go through Texas as part of it. And I get to meet a lot of former veterans who a lot of times go into law enforcement. And I was talking to this one guy, and he was telling me about what happens in El Paso, which is turns out right on the border, and with the town that you probably shouldn't go in on the other side. You probably shouldn't go to Juarez if you're not really skilled at going to Juarez. And he was saying that there's a border agent, just not in town but off town, and there's a little border crossing there that if that dude wasn't willing to live in a trailer at that spot because he likes that part of the world, there would literally be nobody there. There'd be nobody at this checkpoint and they would just be open, right? But because this guy's like, yeah, I like that part of Texas, I'm just gonna stay there. One dude can man that spot. And this is the thing along that border. I mean, and to call it secure, again, you get to define it. It's your administration, but I'm looking around and there's cartel members armed, transporting people and arms north across the border. That's not secure to me.
Right. Well, what people need to understand is that when you are allowing hundreds of thousands of people to get admittance into the interior, you're processing them in. That requires a lot of labor. So they're
Okay.
pulling Border Patrol off of the line to do processing paperwork duty for their entire shifts for weeks and months.
Mm,
So there are huge swaths of border that are just unmanned. There's nobody
yeah.
there, and the cartels and the criminals and everybody on the Mexican side are looking at that and saying, we're going for it. And so there are all these secondary, it's a collapse. It's like a domino collapse of
Mm,
problems that stem from your initial decision to just let all these people in. The way you do border security, I think, as we've seen, is you let no one in. You hermetically seal it and make them go the legal route. That's how, like, most countries in the world do it, and how
right.
most countries that have ever existed do it, that don't even exist anymore, mainly when they stop doing it. But thinking about the Roman Empire.
Yeah. 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 We It's just so frustrating. Let's go back to Kamala Harris, the vice president, who has done very little. I mean, we've not heard anything other than her laughing and talking about Europe and all these other things that have nothing to do with this particular problem. And now she's going to say that the border's secure. How do we even take that seriously? I mean, look, I'm not against her and being a vice president is an interesting job, but uh, there's no credibility there. I mean, this is someone who isn't liked within her own party, isn't liked in the general public. And so whatever she says after the flippant attitude she's had, it's hard to take. It's hard to take serious.
Well, if you know what's happening at the border, if you've gone to the website and looked at the numbers, the nonpartisan numbers tell you the whole story. But I think what's going on there really is, the midterms are coming up. They're on a talking point. That thing about the border being secure. If some reporter would just ask them when they're, because Mayorkas is saying it, the president is saying it, they're all saying the border is secure. Somebody just needs to say, well, what's your definition of security?
Yeah.
And I think they'll have an answer to that. Their answer will be that there's no big Del Rio migrant camp. There's, we're orderly and we're processing them successfully into America. And in their minds, that's border security. So, and then it also has the same effect on people who don't know anything about the border and love those guys and believe everything they say.
Mm,
And so it's a narrative of, yeah, okay, it's fine. That's why these bus trips to Martha's Vineyard and all these things in New York City are so interesting, because it's forcing people to say, oh my God, why are you doing this to us?
yeah.
Because they can see it. Now they can see it.
Yeah. Now they can see it.
By the way, Harris, the president, still has not gone down to the border. He
Right.
refuses to even to go to the border to as the commander in chief and the head of DHS and Homeland Security at a time of, like, this is the moon landing of immigration crises. This is like the discovery of flight. I mean, this is the biggest thing that has ever happened, maybe since 9/11 for national security, for border security. It's a huge development, and the president won't go there. And when he does send Harris down there, or Mayorkas, they stay away from the non-walled areas. Where there's wall, there's nothing happening,
Yeah.
because walls work, And they usually don't even do that. They'll be inland behind a bunch of wall, and in a walled area. They'll be inland inside a facility, an office somewhere. They never go down to the river where you would see thousands and thousands of people that day, any day of the week, pouring through, because these guys have press entourages with them from the White
Right.
House press corps, and where they go, those cameras go. So they won't go anywhere near that. But any American citizen who wants to go down to the border, to go to an unwalled part, and you will see thousands and thousands of people just crossing over and being invited by uniformed law enforcement, armed, badge carrying people, just saying, right up this way, please. Watch your step. There's rocks over here. That sort of thing. It's like unbelievable.
Yeah, and it's frustrating, right? Because now I have to speak in defense of Donald Trump, but and who's an unlikable guy, I mean, it just absolutely drives me crazy. But he hands this administration a net positive in terms of energy creation. He hands them a relatively secure border, significantly more secure than now. And these are things that matter internationally. These two things combined, it gives us freedom to do things. He hands them an economy that can build things internally, and all that stuff is just thrown away. And it makes you wonder, like, how do you do this job so poor? I mean, look, I know how Joe Biden does his job terribly. He's been terrible at his job for a long time, but I just don't get it, man. I don't understand. And I'm not against Democrats at all. I think there's had to be a balance, right, of what we do. And I have no confidence in Republicans to get this right either. But here's Donald Trump, a guy who's like, we're gonna bring back jobs to America, we're gonna secure the border, and we're gonna be energy independent. That sounds like a winning platform for any politician at the national level.
Well, somebody else will have to have those policies, but listen, I heard Harris say just the other day that, look, we inherited a broken system that we're trying to fix. But the reality is, by the numbers and by all other measures, by every objective metric, they handed Trump handed them a fixed border, relatively fixed border, about somewhere between 700 and 1,500 a day we're crossing, compared to like 8,000 a day now.
Mm.
So he handed them a fixed border that they broke immediately. And
On purpose.
on purpose. I don't believe that this was an accident, and I don't believe that it's incompetence anymore, because there are people inside the White House that know better and tried an insurgency to fix this, and they failed in their insurgency. This is coming from a very far left faction of the Democratic Party that ascended to influence inside the White House. It's the kind of the Bernie Sanders, far left.
Yeah.
It's a very influential and important part of the base, and they had to kowtow to that part of the base. This is what that part of the base wanted, and this is what they got. And my book, Overrun, has a huge chapter dedicated to who they are, how they got to power, and what their ideology is.
You can get that book once it drops, what, later this year, right?
Yeah, in December. Right now, it just went up for pre-order. You could go to toddbensman.com and find it right there on the front, and
Right.
it'll take you right into a pre-order page. I'd appreciate that, but it comes out in December. And all of this is explained and well reported about what happened and why this is happening. It was not an accident, and it's not incompetence.
Well, I mean, it could still be incompetence. It's great if it works. It's like the coach is like, "Don't shoot that three." The guy shoots it. You're like, "No, yes." So if it all works out, it doesn't seem to be working out though, and this creates problems because then at the midterms, we're gonna wipe all that stuff out. We're gonna hamstring this administration because they need hamstringing, and then we'll have the other version of the problem, and so we don't get anywhere. We don't go back. We have a bad Frankenstein immigration policy, right? It's just like we just come in and we're like, sew this arm on the body instead of that arm. Leave that arm there too, and so we get this stupid, crazy monster that can't be managed because Maybe the country's unmanageable. I don't know. Here's the link, by the way, everybody, for the book. Just go to toddbensman.com. It is the first thing on there, and the book's called Overrun, and it's got a whole long title with that. But go there and definitely and get that on pre-sales. Yeah. So you have people from the party that are like, "Hey, don't do this." I think we had the same thing in the last administration where they're like, "Hey, don't say that." That'd be probably the main thing you'd say with the Trump administration. But these are the problems that we're trying to identify. Are these solvable problems, Todd? I mean, or is this just beyond our capability because we can't get along as a nation good enough to actually do anything good enough to deal with the problems?
Well, these are what people in Homeland Security and other fields might call um, sort of it's an unwinnable it's called a wicked problem,
Yeah.
which is a problem that is, by definition unsolvable. But it doesn't mean that it's not manageable down, that you manage it down, kind of like pedophilia or child molestation. You're just never going to solve that problem, but you certainly have an obligation to do everything in your power to manage it down. And I think what's happening here is, they're managing this on purpose up, this one. They're opening it up and they like it. They want all these people to come into the country. That's part of an ideology that holds that, there's this human right to migrate anywhere you want to go, that borders are obsolete or anachronistic, or that's the ideology. And deportation, detention, those things are civil rights violations to them. In that's how they think. It's this ideology. And no experiment like that really has ever been tried anywhere until this administration, in any country anywhere. Nobody does that. Not even the Democrats did that.
Again, this goes back to the whole thing. Like, okay, great, provision it. I mean, how are you going to pay for that? We're broke as a country to the tune of tens of trillions of dollars. How do you afford that? And how do you prevent the atrocities from happening? I promise getting human trafficked across the border by cartels is not going to be a wonderful, like, hey, let's do that again kind of process.
Well,
I mean,
this is transformational. The population increase from this is permanent. We're never going to remove these people. There are too many, and they're children. So you can't remove families with young children in front of TV cameras. Nobody can do that. So that's never going to happen. So we're just stuck with the cost of at least a couple million people in the last year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
We're probably looking at another 2 million. So for 4 million in the next 18 months, 4 million largely uneducated, unskilled families with needs, heavy needs, into the country, to cities all across the nation. And that still leaves another 6 months of the Biden administration. So figure 5 million people by the end of 2024 will be inside the country. And that's not a crazy pie in the sky number. That's based on current knowledge and projections. It's probably going to be much higher than that, actually. If another Democrat were to get in and continue these policies for another 4 years, you're looking at a population of 10 or 12 million people. That's as many people that came in during the entire 67-year span of Ellis Island.
Right.
In 8 years. Somebody's going to have to pay for that.
Yeah.
And you already have these cities like Chicago and New York and Washington asking for federal bailouts to help them deal with just the bus loads that they got from Greg Abbott in Texas. Those numbers are tiny compared to the number that have already gone into those cities on their own power.
Yeah. How do you manage this? I mean, okay, so
it's easy. It's easy.
Yeah.
This is simple solution stuff. So in talking to migrants, and this is all through my book, Overrun. It's backed by interviews with the immigrants before they get lawyered, when they're still on the way in, before they ever talk to an immigration lawyer who says, yeah, don't say that stuff. What they say is, I have to pay $10,000, borrow it, to a smuggler. If I'm going to lay down that kind of money, I have to have a high degree of confidence, that of a high odds that I'm going to get in and stay in, so that
Right.
my money pays off. It's just that simple. When the odds are high that their smuggling fee is going to pay off, they don't, they come. They all come. The odds right now are extremely high, especially if you're a family with young kids. You're getting in for sure. If you're a pregnant woman 7 months, you're in. If you're an unaccompanied minor, you're in 100%. They're not going to turn you back. So those people are borrowing money and laying that money down. When you lower the odds of success, meaning deportation, you're going to end up in Mexico, you're going to be shipped back home, you are not going to lay down $10,000. You wouldn't do it, I wouldn't do it, and they don't
Right.
do it. It's just that simple. Lower the odds of successful entry and stay.
One of the things
And
we
that's,
talked about,
that's what Trump did, by the way. Trump did that, and they stayed home.
right, right. One of the things we talked about before was the nature of the people that come from all over the world. There's, dozens of countries where folks are coming in from, but they're not these destitute people for the most part. They're people that have some kind of means, from what you were saying. Like, like, hey, if you don't feed them, you know what they do? They go into Mexico and they buy food, right? And so give us a sense for who is like en masse, and it's unfair to do this because they're all individuals from a lot of different places, but what is the nature of the people that are trying to get into the country?
I don't really know, but it does run the gamut. I mean, just based on my meetings with them and spending a lot of time, is, some of them are very well resourced. They're coming from places like Venezuela, where they had funds. They were coming. The Haitians were mostly coming from Chile and Brazil, where they'd been living and working for years. They had big kitties, safety, safe. They had money and savings and nice clothing and iPhones and everything. So a lot of them have resources, not enough to gamble on smuggling fees if they weren't going to get in, but right, no problem if they were going to get in. This is the time to spend that money we've been saving. So, and then you also have people who are just, flying by the seat of their pants. They got nothing. They're getting free clothes from people along the way. They're, getting, milk and, powdered milk and stuff is being handed to them. And those people are relying on a support system that is in place all along the migrant trails by the United Nations, which, with using U.S. taxpayer money, which hands debit cards out and provides shelter and money for hotels, and there are nonprofits all along the way that are helping to support, and they know that they're not going to starve on the way. They're not going to be flush, but nobody's going to let them starve on the way. There's too much support. So you really just have the gamut, Then there are some absolutely wealthy people. They just don't like their country. They want to live in America. They saw television advertisements and internet about life in America. So now they can get in. They're going to be let in. So those people will fly from wherever they are to Mexico City or Monterey. And then they'll be in 5-star hotels. And a lot of them will take a 2 or 3 week vacation in Cancun before they make the final
this
move
all
over.
Sounds ridiculous.
The rest of, people are coming over the border wearing Gucci, just the finest clothing, carrying their luggage up the embankment, fresh off the planes, just because they can. They're going to get in. They're going to get in. So they can, and they're like, wow, let's do it. Let's do this thing. It's open.
It sounds comical. It sounds like that. Come on. It's like you've got this, it's like a sitcom,
Yeah, I mean, they bring not just the whole family, but they're bringing the family pets. They've got dogs. They're bringing their puppies and dogs and cats. And then the cats. And we have this whole process where we have to quarantine the animal for a few days, and then we reunite them with their animals and bring them on in. It's the
Yeah.
whole family.
Yeah.
Everybody's like, we borders open like it's never been in the history of America.
Yeah. What what if they're right? What if this is the way to do it? This is how you keep your country young and vibrant and motivated.
Well, a lot of people argue that, we're a nation of immigrants, and you hear that argument out there. We have a labor shortage. You hear that these people are willing to work and work hard, but the it comes with problems. That comes with problems, and that is that almost everybody that comes across the border. Well, let me put it this way: when they apply through the legal processes and as refugees or something like that, like we kind of know who they are. We take their fingerprints, they give us their names, we make them show the ID, we photocopy their passports, we run them through criminal databases, and we have some knowledge about
Yeah.
them. And we can see maybe if they're lying about something, but when they come through the border, it's just complete strangers. You have no clue who these guys are. I find on the banks of the Rio Grande all the time passports and identifications strewn around. They throw them down and say, "My name is Mickey Mouse. Prove me otherwise."
Right.
And so that's stranger danger, man. I mean, that's like the height of stranger danger. When a country does that, they're importing criminals. They
Yeah.
are. There are going to be a lot of criminals that we've just let in. Some of them might be war criminals. I've met uh, Africans from every nation on the continent. I just wrote a piece. You can find it on my website. I think I call it Jungle Jabba, Master, General Grand Dragon, and General Moses, who are three Liberian war criminals that got in, and they were heinous, horrible guys that would eat the hearts of their victims and rape children and just horrendous stuff in Liberia. And I've met a ton of Liberians coming in who have no idea who they are, what they did in the wars. Cameroonians, terrible wars, tribal conflicts. They're slaughtering each other, cutting limbs off, and all. These are like military aged, strong young men that look like they could sure as hell have been in a militia over there doing that stuff. So that's the problem. You're importing. You can't just have a screenless open border with no possible way to tell who's coming through. We had 66 FBI watch listed terrorists get caught on the border in just the last 10 months. That's a record. That number of people who are already on the FBI's terror watch list from all over the world. I mean, we've had 1 million people get through undetected, unapprehended into the country. Well, how many of those guys got in with the 1 million? We're going to find out. Trust me, we're going to find out.
Yeah. I I promise there are people with bad intent. I've looked for these people and they exist and they want nothing good for us. And when we just invite in, some of them are going to absorb and they're going to be like, yeah, this is awesome. I love making money as a computer programmer and going to Hooters afterwards. And some of those folks will absorb just fine. But there's plenty that are also ideologues and they are inculcated into something that's horrible.
And there's a really good reason why no other country on the planet does this. Nobody does this.
Yeah.
There's smart people behind the governments of those countries that don't do this.
Yeah, it's foolish, right? I mean, usually people on the watch list, right? And if there's 66 in less than a year, then there's 400, I mean, there's a lot that are getting through because you don't catch everybody.
And
And
also, there are probably people coming through that ought to be on the watch list that aren't. You
oh
know,
yeah, sure.
not everybody's on the watch list. That's just the ones
Yeah.
who are on the watch list.
Makes me feel real comfortable and safe. We have
Hey,
all this
I'm
stuff
happy
to
to
talk about all these problems, but here, like, we're inviting problems unnecessarily. Like, we can still be a country that's very supportive of immigration and everything, but this just sounds insane.
Yeah, it's absurd. It really is. And what's even more absurd is that there are all sorts of people that just deny that these are risks. That they're just like, ah, that's okay. We can take some terrorists. They're fine with it. They're fine with it. But let me just tell you one other thing. I had for the book, I spent a lot of time on the ICE and CBP news release websites. And every time they catch a really bad guy and deport him, a criminal or something like that, they like to put they're proud of that, and correctly so. But they put these press releases out, and those are really the only database out there that gives you a sense of the type of criminals that they're catching down there. There are literally thousands of these press releases. It's a fantastic database for a researcher one day to go through. But I'm talking about, like, on any page, pick any page, and you can scroll for hours and on end and still not even dent the number of pages that are out there. Child rapists convicted, uh, adult rapists of women, murderers who served time for homicide in the United States and got deported. I mean, the worst of the worst, just the most heinous kinds of, like, kidnappers, people that enslaved other people and got caught. Uh, uh, Big time drug traffickers, gang members who have records of slaying people with machetes. Um, People I'm still just like, I don't understand why there are so many child molesters out there,
Right.
but like a huge number of convicted child molesters are getting caught at that border right now, and those are just the ones that made it into press releases.
So you're saying it's not going well.
Yeah, I'm not delivering a happy lunch meal here. Sorry.
Well, it's one of the reasons I like to have you on. How does someone look? We have so much conflicting news on all of these things, and here I've got you here, but I also know that if you go look, you'll see O'Bannon. He's had you on his show, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people that will instantly reject everything that you say because you've been on conservative shows. My show is neither conservative or liberal; it's just down the middle, but credibility goes out the window with some of these folks because that's part of the polarization problem,
I
right?
know. I'm aware of that.
Yeah.
But
Well, yeah.
it's
Go ahead.
it just happens to be the media landscape now, that if you have information that conflicts, it causes cognitive dissonance with a
Yeah.
narrative that
Yeah.
you have been inculcated with. That has nothing to do with facts. That
Right.
you will not be, as a TV host or a podcast host, you will not be disabused of your narrative.
Mhm.
Then you're not going to have somebody like me on anyway. So then that leaves only the people that whose narratives would be supported by information that I have. And that's just the way it is. I would be happy to go on anybody's show and talk about my research. I'll go on CNN, MSNBC. One time I did have an invitation from MSNBC to go on their show, and I was like, yeah, I was so excited. I was telling my bosses at the center, oh my God, I can't wait. And then they never called back. So they probably Googled me or something.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
people at CNN or whatever, they won't have me. They wouldn't have me anyway, because what I have to offer you is
Not
interviews with
comfortable.
with real immigrants. I'm down there. I'm in Mexico with them
Yeah.
for just weeks and months. I can tell you what they're saying.
Yeah, this is part of the problem, right? It's like Well, first off, the fact that they even invite you, right? I mean, I was going to say, it's a good chance they won't even have you on because this goes counter to what they want to put out and what they want to hear, and it doesn't surprise me that they cancel because it takes courage to talk about things that are uncomfortable like this and terrifying, right? Like you look at crime, almost all goes together. Crime rates are going up, right? I'm not saying we had our hands wrapped around crime, and there's a lot of things we need to do with it to improve our system. But one of the things to do that's opposite of improving it is bringing in international thugs and warlords. I know a lot of warlords, face to face know them, and these guys don't have to play by the rules. When people's moms say violence is never the answer, that is not true.
That's funny. Yeah, well, and I have the same problem sometimes with the conservative media. I'll have a story or some kind of an observation, and they're not that interested in it because it runs counter to their narrative. But I don't really care. I'll just say it. I mean, take it for what it's worth. You've been through the public school system. You should be able to handle information. Change your mind the way you want, but it's on the immigration issue happens to fall squarely on the partisan cultural fault line, and so there's no winning that at all. If you are reporting the truth about what's actually happening, you are going to be rejected by people who reject that truth. They have their own idea that's often not based at all on any kind of personal experience or research. Anyway, I could bitch about that all day.
Seriously. Well, so can I.
Go on MSNBC. Bring me. Argue with me.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing, right? Is like that's not an open forum. We invited Greg Louganis on the show, and it wasn't me that did the inviting, but his manager was like, "We would never go on a show with you because of this person's fairly apolitical stance." And it's like, and I don't mind calling it out because you sent an email. I can forward the email and the ugliness of it, right? I'm not going to say who that person was, but they represent Greg Louganis, a person that we just wanted to talk to because everybody loves this guy. And I don't see Greg on a lot of media, by the way. Not a lot of folks are asking him, but this is the problem. If we can't have these conversations, if Texas doesn't fund a center where you can go out and do more research and go out and do these things, we would never know it. As much as we want to understand any number of things at the PhD level or at the level that you're going at, which is very comparable. We need people to go out and do that. We need to fund that. I'd rather fund you learning about this and helping us understand how to make a better immigration policy than to just say, hey, everybody, come on into America. No worries, no problems at all. Bring your fentanyl. Bring your child rapists. Hey, whatever. And you think about the world leaders that are like, I'm going to give you $5,000 to go to America, child rapist. You don't have to be in jail here, and it's just the flotilla all over again.
Yeah. I don't get the child rapist thing. There's just so many. That is a strange thing.
Yeah. And it's just exasperating, right? Because if I ran a country, and the United States was like, we'll take all your shittiest people. I promise I'm going to get them off my books. And for a small amount of money, get them north and get them across the border. They're not my problem anymore. I don't got to pay for them. I don't got to worry about them getting out and raping my people. See ya. Have fun in America.
Right. It's like, the Mariel boat lift times, 100. You can empty your psychiatric wards. You can empty your prisons. I think that's what's happening with Venezuela right now. I think that they're emptying their prisons and giving them enough money to go to the United States, based on things that I'm hearing from other journalists that are traveling among them down there.
Do you have any good news?
No, none. We're just in the midst of this incredible conflagration. Now, that's from my point of view. If you were to get a good progressive liberal on this show, they would tell you why this is really great news for the country, and they might talk about lower wages, meeting a labor market that's hungry, So I'm just a border security hawk. I come from a homeland security background. I know what stranger danger is. I'm a parent too. I know what stranger danger is, and I also know objectively that nobody else does this anywhere in the world, nor have they through history to ancient times. So there must be a clue in that fact. Anyway,
Yeah.
I
Anyway. Yeah. And the thing is I love immigrants. I love the next person. But why do we have this Iraqis who worked with us can't come in? Just let them come on in then if we're going to have it. And let's pick some good people along the way too. But we don't do that. So anyhow, listen, everybody, this is Todd Benson. Bensman. You can absolutely go to his website, which is right here, Todd Bensman. I'm going to pull it up in a second here. Todd Bensman, and there it is. There it is. ToddBensman.com. You can get everything there. Check the New York Post. He's got stories in there, a couple of them. And look, this guy's on the show because he knows this stuff. He's dug deep. He's been all over the place showing us what our policy looks like. And I sure as hell don't like it. And I appreciate you coming on. Anything in closing for you, Todd?
No, not really. Just that this thing is not over.
Yeah.
This is going to be I think it is an election issue, a significant one, more for Republicans. Probably it's energizing Republicans, like the abortion debate is energizing the Democrats.
Yeah.
So but I think a lot of Democrats are upset about this. They don't like it either. Democrats have always been pretty hawky about the border. Barack Obama was a big border hawk, and even as recently as a few months ago, he said in a media interview, "This what's happening at the border is not sustainable. We can't, as a nation, give up our sovereignty like this."
Yeah.
Barack Obama is saying that.
And you also you can't expect to get elected. I mean, America does not want this much danger, these many strangers coming in. Just let's process them faster. Let's create capacity there, but let's fund it. Don't just say, who cares what the cost is, and then just let them come in. That's reckless and dangerous and expensive. All right, I'm going to shut this thing down. Stand by 1 sec. Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank you.